but we went out to SF and we stayed at Jim Thiebaud's house. Skated with like Jim, Tommy, Julian Stranger, Javante, like Rick Abaceta. We skated with that whole crew for like 4 or 5 days. We went to skate camp with those guys. I got kicked out of skate camp for lighting off a firework on the side of the road. I got kicked out of the whole state park. So then Sheffy and I drove down and stayed at Naudis's house. So, I mean, I went a trip like that. I went home at 16. That's like, I always try to, like, people that aren't familiar with skating or even that time, I try to give them an example of what, like, to be 16 years old in 1990 to go stay at Naudis's house was like. It's literally like being into basketball and you're going to go you end up staying at LeBron's house, like, randomly. Like, that's how insane it was. So when I went home from that, it was just a no-brainer. I knew, like, that was the summer before my senior year of high school. So I basically, that whole next year, I just saved money, worked, skated, and then moved day after I turned 18.
So you're living in SF, and who are you living with? What was the living situation like?
I was living with SF with my friend from Ann Arbor at the time. We came out together.
Did you know people when you were already going over there, or not really?
I knew Greg Carroll, Mike Carroll's brother, who was sponsor. He was my first sponsor. He was like the team manager for Venture. Like, literally the day he got the job as a Venture team manager, that trip when I was 16, I was the first person he put on Venture, which is pretty rad. Partly because we started talking and he was born in Ann Arbor. So he's like, yo, you're born in Ann Arbor. So we got to be friends and we skated and he like put me on Venture. So I knew Greg, and actually when I first came to SF, I flew out, before my friend came, I flew out solo. And I stayed at Greg's house and Mike Carroll. So Greg and Mike Carroll lived in this house in Daly City, and their mom was never there. It was basically like their house. Mike was probably like 15, something like that. It was really weird because, like, I didn't know those dudes. Mike was cool, I guess, but I was some weird kid that his brother, like, told I could stay at their house, And I stayed there for a while. Like, Rick Howard was staying there when I was there. It was, like, really uncomfortable for me because I just didn't know those guys. I was just some fucking kid,
So you only knew his brother, and they were
I knew his brother, but Greg was never there. It was me, most of the time it was me by myself.
Was on the couch?
They had this guest room downstairs, but sometimes I'd come in and it'd be like Mike Carroll and Rick Howard. This is like right when Plan B was starting. And those guys were kind of cool, but they, you know what I mean? Like, I always tell Rick, like, now, like, you were definitely a dick to me back then, but that's just how it was, you know? Rick actually really fucked with me, and I wasn't, like, savvy enough to understand that he was fucking with me. I was like, fuck that guy, So yeah, I stayed there and then got an apartment. It's classic. I think people still take this route. It's like, to this day, I'm guessing you move to SF. Maybe not now because SF's so fucking expensive, but forever you move to SF, you get a studio apartment in the Tenderloin. That's what you do for the first like couple of years. That's what everyone did. So you have like some studio apartment where you come out your door and there's like literally people fucking passed out, smoking crack. It's fucked up. But that's where you live, and pretty much everyone took that same kind of path, at least while I lived there. So yeah, I did Tenderloin, then I lived up the street a bit on Bush Street. I lived with Joe Brook, who's a skate photographer, who's from Michigan. They came on after, and Dave Meddy, who's also from Michigan. Then I lived with Gabe Morford, lived with Mike Dare. When you're young, it's probably the same as in New York. I feel like every year I'd have like a new place,
Yeah.
So I lived all over SF during that 9 or 10 years I was there.
Were you partying at all? Like, did you ever get into, just tons of drinking and skateboarding at the same time, and that being the lifestyle?
I didn't. Like, I feel like, I wouldn't say I like blew it in my 20s, but like I was like really not taking advantage of the opportunities that were at hand in terms of like going out, seeing people, girls, I was like, honestly, that was a really, like, the first year that I moved there was great. I got sponsored. I was skating super fucking good. And then this thing happened where I was like sort of, getting, I was like, got on stereo, and there's like a little bit more pressure on me to skate. I was sort of out of my comfort zone, if that makes sense. And that was kind of mixed with, something happened to where I like suddenly didn't feel connected with my board, you know? And I was also still in school. I was going to school part-time during this time, and which at first was fine, but then I was in school, and it's this thing that happened to where I kind of became disconnected with my skateboard. I think I was unhappy in a lot of ways. I wasn't confident. I wasn't connected with my board. I wasn't like, whatever was going on with me, I just wasn't skating well. I wasn't happy. I was like too serious, you know, like, so yeah, no, I didn't respond to that by going out and going get fucked up all the time. I responded to that by sort of just becoming really, I wouldn't say I was antisocial, but I was really solitary, you know. I would just kind of like hang out at home a lot, watch movies, read. I think I got kind of depressed. I feel like that period of time, there was like 2 or 3 years where I think in hindsight, I should have probably been skating all the time and ripping and probably would have turned pro. But I was just in this weird funk, you know? And when I look back at those years, I can just feel, you know, I'm probably like most people, when things are that long ago, I kind of remember them. I remember periods of time sort of emotionally. Like I think of an apartment that I lived in, or I'm like, yeah, that wasn't really like a good time for me, you know? And there's a good 2 or 3 year stretch where I think, even though I was like traveling and I was skating and, you know, was getting free boards and skating with some of the best skaters, and they were my really good friends, I just wasn't like happy, you know? And took a while for me to get out of that. So yeah, I was always sort of square. I never was partying ever.
What do you think the source of the unhappiness came from? Were you just not sure what you were going to do with your life? You didn't want to go pro or something, or?
Yeah, I think I was just insecure. Honestly, I think that's what it was. I think I was really insecure. I think I was insecure, and I just didn't have that like spark, you know what I mean? Like I just felt kind of lost, and it wasn't something that I was ever, you know, I wasn't aware of it. You know, I felt like I was probably doing all right, but looking back, it's pretty clear that like something wasn't connecting, you know? And eventually I was like frustrated, like, why am I not turning pro? Cause like, you know, your friends are always like, why aren't you pro? You know, like go to like Scale and Barcadero, like people will be like, yo, why aren't you pro yet? You know? But I don't think I deserved it because I wasn't skating well. You know, I wasn't like, I had the talent, but I wasn't like applying myself. I didn't know how, you know, I didn't have that sort of like fire in me. I think that fire that when I started skating, I was so like, I had this dream the other night where I was back in my hometown skating the business school, which is where I grew up skating, which I spent probably more time there than I spent at home. Honestly, we'd be there every night. And in this dream, I was skating the business school, and I was so fucking excited to skate. And when I woke up from this dream, I remembered like that's really how I felt. I remember when I'd be, you know, like driving in when I had a car, I'd pulling up to skate, and I could see my friends skating, like my hands would be shaking, getting my board out of the trunk. I'd be so excited to skate. I just loved to fucking skate. And that somehow got interrupted, you know? I think it was just maybe being sponsored, being in an unfamiliar place, being with really good skaters. There's more eyes on you. There's all these things, you know? I was insecure. And I think it really fucked me up for a while, you know?
At the time, did you talk to anybody about it? Or you said
No,
you were a little bit unaware of it,
I
right?
don't think I was even aware of it. Does that make sense? You know, it wasn't until I kind of years later can look back, I was like, yeah, I wasn't really like firing on all cylinders at that time. Mm-hmm. You know, like I have friends who I was with a lot at the time. And I've actually talked to them about this, and they're like, they didn't pick up on it. It wasn't like I was kicking rocks and like not getting out of bed and stuff like that. You know, it's just that sort of, it's a difficult thing to explain. I mean, it was the 1990s where people didn't really talk about that shit. And I was 20 years old, you know, like I didn't have the tools to know how to like navigate through that type of stuff. You're just kind of like on your own, mm-hmm. you know, like I didn't have a girlfriend. So, I mean, in theory, if I would have had a girlfriend, maybe I could have had someone who could have been like, you know, helped kind of like think about those things or shift those things. But I didn't. I'm just hanging out with a bunch of dudes. You don't talk about that, you know? So, yeah.
How did you end up getting out of that?
Honestly, I think it's probably getting into photography. As weird as that sounds, I moved in with Gabe Morford. He gave me a camera. I got really into photography. We built a dark room. This all happened really quickly, within like a few months. And I can just remember that's when I was just like, suddenly it opened something up in me where I started skating really good again. I started like not really caring about, I just started skating. It sounds so stupid to say, but I started kind of skating where I wanted to skate, kind of just feeling really comfortable with the sort of, you know, with skateboarding, it's like you kind of fall in these weird pockets where you get into skating some certain type of thing or some certain place. I was more of in a flow, you know? And so that was like a really, and then that kind of like shooting photos got me really into kind of like watching movies again and shooting Super 8 and just kind of drawing. It was a really creative period of time. Playing guitar and stuff. I played guitar when I was really young, and I started playing guitar again at that time. So I think it was just like photography kind of opened up something in me. I think I wasn't really like, I don't know what it is. So I was like expressing myself or whatever it was. I just felt like at peace. I felt good, you know, so that's what really helped me get out of it.
Were you actively deciding to not pursue the pro skating route? And at what point were you like, I'm going to actually pursue the photography route. I'm going to actually pursue the videography route as my straight up career?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, like, because now all of that happened, everything happened in such a short window of time. You know, it's like, I don't know, I think I got on stereo. I was on reel, but then I got on stereo, I think in 93. By 95, I think I turned pro. And then by the end of 96 or so, I think stereo started to really change. Like Mike Dare, who's a good friend of mine, got kicked off. Maybe it was early 97, I don't remember. The graphics changed. Jason Lee had kind of gone off to do the movies and stuff, and he was always like a real mentor of mine. To be honest, Jason was someone who I could talk to. Jason was probably the one person in my life at that time who would like just talk to me about shit. And he would actually, now that I look back, purposely try to bring stuff out of me, you know? But he was gone. So I just didn't really have a connection with it. And, you know, back then you weren't making much money being a pro skater. I think I was making like $700 a month or something like that, you know? And I just felt like I didn't really see a future for myself in stereo. No disrespect to those guys, you know? I called everyone there, and I just really was excited about cinematography, you know? And I was excited about really taking that on. And I just felt like that period of time when I was with stereo was so special, you know, like that group of people and like the first video that we made, and just that whole period of time was so special. I just felt like, and I hadn't really positioned myself. I wasn't like a top pro or anything, so it's not like I was going to go and get on Alien or Girl or something like that. I just felt like I had like a really good period with stereo. I'm not going to try to milk it. I'm not going to try to like put myself in a position where I'm having to skate if I don't want to skate or not feeling inspired by who I'm with or what I'm a part of. So I'm just going to go off and do something else. So that's like, I left on really good terms. But I think by that time I was like starting to really like, I was really excited about the idea of cinematography and working on set and being a cinematographer and making films and stuff. So
like even just outside of skateboarding?
I had no plan on doing any skateboard related filmmaking at all. Like, even when we were working on the stereo video, there's a point in time where Jason was like, hey, Greg, like, we want to have you start helping to film because we're all filming each other, which was true. We would all, like, Jason filmed some of that video. We'd film each other. But I was, at that time, insecure, and I just felt like threatened by the fact that Jason asked me to help film because I felt like, why? I don't want to be like you know, if you can imagine for an insecure amateur on a team, when the main person on the team asks you to help film a video, you're like, I don't know. Is that how they see me? As like someone who can just help film the videos? I want to be the skater, you know? So I was never interested in making skate videos. And when I left stereo to kind of pursue cinematography, at first I was really wanted just to like, my kind of plan was, I didn't really have like a concrete plan, but I wanted to really like assist as much as I could. I wanted to learn. I wanted to like, I was like interning. I was like trying to go, there's like bulletin boards at the time, you know, in downtown SF. There's a couple like film kind of like rental houses or kind of places where you just see what's going on. And I would volunteer just to come on, sometimes paid, sometimes not paid. But I really wanted to kind of like work on documentaries and eventually film. So like that's kind of, I started working with a wildlife filmmaker, and I was like an assistant. We went to Alaska and filmed bears and did all kinds of crazy shit. So that's like what I did first. And then
what was Alaska like?
It was insane. We went to this place, the McNeil River, which if you follow bears, coastal brown bears are the biggest brown bears in the world, and McNeil River is where the largest congregation of brown bears is. It's a wildlife preserve, so you can't go there. But they have this lottery system where 10 people at a time can go. You take a boat plane out there, you camp about 2 miles away, and with these biologists, and then you walk out, and you can walk out to actually, you're at the river, and you can just sit there and watch these bears. They'd been doing it for, I think, 15 or 20 years, and they were so careful with just making sure that there's no food or no any altercations between people and bears. So by this being the whatever generation of bears that they'd been totally acclimated to humans. So there was no threat. The biologists had guns, but they never had to use it. And there's no like walls or anything. You just go and you sit there, and it's like literally from me to you with these bears that are like, you know, like as big as a car. And we went out there.
Can't they be, sorry to interrupt you, just a question. Can't they be fucking crazy violent bears? Isn't that the thing that people say?
That's sort of, they can with each other. I mean, that's sort of like the sort of stigma that they carry. We went out there in the spring, which is they're hungry and they're fighting all the time. They're like skinny. They just come out of hibernation, and the fish aren't fully coming up, you know, river yet. So they're fighting. And then we went back out there in the summer where they're like all super fat. No one's fighting. They're just laying around because they've just been eating for like 3 months straight, you know? So yeah, they can be pretty aggressive, but, I mean, that was amazing. I basically like lied to this guy, which is fine because I came through, but I told him I could use this Arri SR camera. He asked me if I could use an Arri SR. I don't even know. It's funny. I was talking about that the other day. I was like, I don't even know how I learned how to use it. Because somehow I told this guy, I bought my Bolex that I still have, the Bolex that I've shot every skate video with, I bought that Bolex off this guy. And when I bought it off him, he's like, what do you do? And I was like, oh, I want to be a cinematographer. And he's like, well, can you use an Arri SR? And I was like, yeah, which was a total lie. And he's like, well, hey, my wife was usually my assistant. I'm about to go on this trip to Alaska. I'm a wildlife filmmaker, but she's pregnant. So do you want to come assist? As long as you can use an SR, like you can come and just load and assist me. And I was like, I'm down. It was like in a week or something. So somehow I had to like figure out how to go find an SR and learn how to load it and stuff, so that when I actually came on this job, I actually knew what I was doing. I didn't completely ruin this guy's shoot, you know? But that ended up being the same. I ended up using Arri SRs for like through all DC, like that's became my camera because I got that camera really dialed in on that trip, you know? Oh. So yeah, I did, I was like really pretty serious about cinematography. And then, around that time, I think I saw, a Transworld video, and there was like 16 millimeter in it. I think a 6 Sense or one of those videos. I can't remember. And I was just kind of like, wow, like maybe I could shoot some 16 of skateboarding in SF, and if I could get film, that'd be like a really good way for me to shoot a lot of film. Because back then 16 was still kind of like you wanted to shoot everything on film. There wasn't really like HD yet, you know? So I didn't know Ty Evans. I hit up Ty, cold called him. He was super cool about it, sent me a giant box of film, started shooting 16 for Transworld. And that's sort of how I ended up getting into shooting skateboarding. Like I was never really an intention. Even at that time, I didn't really I didn't really aspire to be a skate filmer or a skate filmmaker. You know, it was just a way for me to like shoot a lot of film out in SF and be with my friends and learn, you know.
Why was skating not the first choice in terms of like filming skating and making videos of skating? Yeah, why was that not the first choice? And instead you went like another route.
I mean, I think just because like the idea of making movies just seemed so awesome, you know, and I'd been so deep in skating for so long. I think I also wanted to distance myself from it a little bit.
That makes sense. So eventually you start making films of skateboarding, videos in skateboarding, and you kind of find yourself making some pretty iconic ones that have become staples over time. Tell me about that. How did that unfold? And yeah, what was that like?
Yeah, I was in SF. I was starting to shoot a lot for Transworld. And Ty basically called me up one day and was like, hey, like, I'm going to go work for Girl. I need to find someone who can kind of take over for me and make these videos with John Holland. Would you be down? You know? And I was like, yeah, I'm down. I didn't really even think through it much. You know what I mean? It was just, for me, it was like, damn, it's an opportunity to like get, you know, make shit and get paid, have a job. So, cause at the time I was picking up random jobs, like freelance, like helping AC and do things, but working on little music videos and stuff. But I was delivering pizza. You know what I mean? Like I didn't have a job like that. So I took that job. I didn't know anything, dude. I didn't know how to use a computer. I think I had used my girlfriend's laptop. She had some like random PC, but like definitely did not know how to like edit. I knew nothing about any of the editing software. I didn't know how to film video. Like Ty sent me a VX1000 once I said I'd be down to help. He sent me a VX1000. Dude, I did not know like anything, like how to like, video. I mean, I knew how to expose. I knew 16 well. I knew cinematography, so I felt comfortable technically, but how to film lines and like, I didn't know any of that. I had to learn it all. And, but Ty and John were like super, super generous with me. Like I went down to Transworld and before I moved down there, I flew down to kind of like meet everyone and get a sense of like what it would be like. And they were in the middle of editing Modus Operandi. So they were like living at the office. And I came in and like met everyone and the computer just seemed so intimidating to me, you know, these big hard drives, which in retrospect was like, it's this big RAID drive that they had just got. It was $5,000. This RAID drive was a 60 gig RAID drive, dude. It was like 3 partitions of 20 gigs. So, but at the time it was all just, there's monitors. It was intimidating. And Ty was editing Mike Carroll's intro and he was like kind of trying to show me how to like, you know, use the mouse and like, like all the fucking shortcuts and stuff. And then he was like, hey, we're going to go get some lunch. Like you can just mess with this and like, we'll grab you some food. And I was like, for real? And he's like, yeah, just do whatever. Just edit it. So I like spent like an hour editing this little section of Mike Carroll's Modus intro, you know? And when he came back, I think I probably edited like 5 seconds or something. But when he came back, he looked at it and he's like, dude, that's sick. And he never changed it, which I've always said was like a real testament to how cool he is, you know, that he like, especially now that I make shit, to like have someone who's, you know, just bring someone into a project you're working on, have them sit down and work on a little section and then just don't even touch it is like pretty special. You know, I don't even know if I would do that because I'm like crazy about how things kind of feel and flow. But yeah, then I moved to LA. It was a trip, man. I moved like from SF to LA. It was so different, you know, going from like my life in San Francisco with no car, living in the city, delivering pizza, being a skateboarder prior to that, you know, to like living in fucking Hollywood and having a car and like going out every day, like sort of meeting people, but also then like filming people that I knew from when I was a skater. So that was kind of weird, you know, because sometimes people didn't, you know, back then there's no social media. So I'd show up with like a camera bag, and like friends who I knew from skateboarding, like other pro skaters, would be like, what are you doing? I'd be like, oh, I work for Transworld now. Like they'd be like, it's so fucking random, you know, which it was. So it was a big adjustment, and like, it was a lot of pressure, you know, at the time. A lot of people watched those videos. There was a lot of pressure on me. Like at the time they made 2 videos a year. So every 6 months they were making a new video. And, you know, it's funny, like those guys would just live at the office for like 3 or 4 weeks and just power through a fucking video. So I thought, okay, I guess that's how it's supposed to be, you know? So that's what I would do, you know? So I made, you know, 3 videos over like a year and a half with John Holland, who was awesome. He was really generous as well, and just so cool to work with and travel with, and such a rad dude. Yeah, I did that. And then, you know, long story short, Joe Castrucci was living in LA doing Habitat. Photosynthesis had just come out, and he got a job. He was going to make a video for DC, and he quickly kind of pulled me on it. So he was like, do you want to make this DC video with me? They had this guy, Jamie Mossberg, doing it prior, but that didn't work out. So I don't know if they fired him or they just ended that. And then Joe and I came in to kind of restart this DC video, which at the time DC was this huge brand. They never made a video. But in my mind, it was like, wow, this is a way, in terms of that whole filmmaking thing that I had been exploring, you know, prior, like, and what I wanted to do. This is like an awesome way for me to be able to like work with bigger budgets and use different cameras and really kind of push myself technically, you know. So Joe and I met with Ken Block, and Ken was awesome, and that lasted like 3 weeks or something, until Joe was like, dude, I'm moving back to Ohio. I'm going to bail. Do you want to do this by yourself? Like, I think Joe and I were doing that video together for like 2 or 3 weeks before I ended up doing it by myself, which I was not ready for that. Still, even though I'd done those videos for Transworld, that was like a big kind of thing for me. But I met with Ken, and Ken was just such a supportive, rad dude. And he's like, I trust you. I like what you've done. I think you do a great job. Let's do it, you know? So that's kind of what started me doing the bigger videos myself.
So when you're filming for things like the DC video or Alien Workshop, and essentially you're around these pros all the time, for a while, like some videos take 5 years, some videos take, you know, it takes a while to film, and you're with them all the time, probably touring. And the thing about professional skateboarding is there's like downtime, and then that downtime is like not necessarily regulated. So a lot of them will start partying, and then you might be you're probably young, and then you have all this money, you know, like this, how the story goes, but you're also in the van because you're filming, and then you're editing and all that stuff. And how different is the lifestyle, I guess, from your perspective of doing kind of like the same, like you're both at the same spot during the daytime, and then like you're both in the van during the daytime, and then seeing that happen from your perspective? How is that?
Do you mean like seeing people that are like having to kind of deal with the personalities, and seeing people that are kind of blowing it? Like
kind of like a mixture of that, but also like you're telling me you're sober. You never got into partying like that. So you're there like with a camera documenting all of this stuff, and y'all are probably kind of the same age. Yeah. What is that like? What is that experience like?
Well, I would say I've been pretty lucky that even that video, which had like I guess Workshop was the same. I mean, the most like diverse, eccentric personalities you could ever put together, you know? But through those projects, I feel like I've been pretty lucky that there's always been like a core group of people that are really working hard. You know what I mean? Even if they're partying, they're like working hard. So yeah, it's weird because there are people who are like much less on your sort of wavelength, right? But at the same time, everyone's under a great deal of pressure because they're making a lot of money. At the time, that video is like, they know it's going to be the biggest project of their career or whatever you want to call it. So they know they need to come through. You know what I mean? So I think I've been pretty lucky that I've always been with pretty good crews, you know? And I think, to be honest, a lot of times when people do come on these trips, when even back then they would come on these trips or they'd go on trips with me, I think they would know that there's, even if they're fucking up in life, and maybe they were in their careers or whatever, they would know that at that time they had to like take it a little bit more seriously, you know? So I always felt it's a really hard line to walk, you know? It's like, and I see a lot of people, photographers and filmers, struggle with it because you want to be everyone's friend, you know, because you truly want to be their friend. But at the same time, you can't just be their friend because there's accountability thing there, and you have a responsibility too to kind of like bring the most out of these people, you know, and to also deliver to the people who are paying for the project or the people that own the company or whatever. Like they're trusting you to bring the most out of these people. So, you know, you have to be like, you don't want to be, you want to be someone that everyone can hang out with, you know? And I would say I've always been a little bit, I would say on the mellower side, you know? Like I always hear stories about Ty Evans when he was with Girl, that he would like have people out till 4 a.m. and he was like super militant, like let's go, which is also really fucking effective because you see what they've done. I don't have that in my personality. I'm sort of more like, I'll do everything I possibly can to like get the people from point A to point B. That's the way I look at it. Like if that means waking up early and going to get coffee and knowing what everyone wants and waking them up with a coffee, and then if the spot maybe that I know for some certain person is going to be a problem, like it needs to be fixed or whatever, like I'll go there in the middle of the night or on my own time, or just make sure that if we go there that it's gonna be there, you know? Like I basically just try to do everything I can to facilitate everyone to kind of like be their best, you know? And I feel like being a drill sergeant doesn't help. I feel like I kind of, at least there, it worked for Ty, and I'm sure it works for other people. I think someone like Jamie Thomas was pretty gnarly too, right? But I kind of more found a sort of sweet spot where I can be, I think, a little bit mellower. I can be supportive. I can be a little bit more easygoing. But at the same time, like, try to let people know that we really need to get this. Try to be really honest with people. You know what I mean? I think the honesty is really important. Like, sometimes you have to just tell people, like, dude, you got to do this. We got to figure this out. You know, I'm here for you. So everyone has their own thing. But it's hard because it's like, there is sort of like an isolating factor to it, you know, because you are the person who's like planning the trip. You have to make some of the shitty decisions sometimes, like who comes, who doesn't come. Like maybe someone wants to go to this town. You don't want to, you know, little things like that. But it can kind of add up to where you're sort of like, you're not the person. Sometimes there's like that crew where they're kind of in their own thing and they're working hard and they're doing their thing, but I'm sort of like on my own island. So it can be,
you're setting rules and shit.
Yeah. It's like being a dad or something, you know, and it can be kind of isolating at times. So I think it's kind of like being a dad. And it's like, I think I tried to be like kind of a cool dad, you know, but at the same time, you got to be a dad. I feel like I see some people in that role, they crumble. They just want to be everyone's friend and they go out partying all the time, or they're like, they align with certain team riders and not other team riders, and these factions get created and it gets all fucked up. Like that's the thing too, is like, it's hard, man, with all these personalities. You know, I had to really kind of like carefully kind of like make sure everyone has my trust, you know, not be really straight with everyone, not like align too much in these little cliques, but try to be kind of in the middle, you know? So it can be tricky, and there's no like rule book for it or anything. You just have to kind of like figure out how it works best for your kind of nature and your own personality.
Yeah. What was a lifestyle like that you were living day to day life when you're filming for things like the Alien video or filming for Vans, and how is that?
Well, you know, from when I started working at Transworld all the way through the middle of Vans, my whole life was my work, you know, especially when I was like working for a workshop like Minefield. Like my whole entire life was that project, you know, decidedly so. It wasn't like I wasn't forced on me. That's just kind of where I was at. Like I specifically remember having to go to like a wedding or something like that, and leaving. It was like, I think it was like Dill and Omar and Van Engelen or something, and another filmer had come to film them, and I had to leave. And I remember driving away and seeing them in the rear view. And I swear, it sounds so fucking stupid, but it felt like I was like, I'd spent so much time with them every day working on this thing that it was so weird to leave them with someone else. You know what I mean? Like my whole life was like that project. If I wasn't, I mean, you know, I had other friends. I did other shit, but I mean, really, it was like, you know, I'm going to go to Palo Alto tonight. Let's go. Boom, drive there, you know. Got a trip. Sometimes I'd be only home for like 3 or 4 days a month, or, you know, less, or 5 days in a month or something. Sometimes not at all. I had no relationship. I had no, obviously kids or anything. I just basically lived my work. So I think that's how those projects, that's why those projects kind of yielded what they did, because I was like that committed to it. I was that, like, if no one was skating one day, usually I'd go out and I'd just film like B-roll and film like visuals and stuff like that.
Wow. So you were in 100%.
Mm-hmm. And then when I had kids, it was a really difficult adjustment because, and it's still hard for me. You know, I'm not filming like I used to, you know, not at all. I mean, you know, most skaters now have filmers that are their kind of peers. You know, they're not going to go out with me sometimes, but not often. You know, it's sort of like a young person's game, you know. But even once I had kids, it became really difficult because, like, I couldn't be dedicated to it like that anymore. So I had to figure out how to, like, but I had built this whole thing up to that, which is like, that's how I worked. That's how I made shit. You know, that sort of was like my value. People knew if like they have me come and work on a project that like, this is what I'm going to deliver. But the only way to deliver something like that is to be just a fucking maniac and only shoot and then you go somewhere and you edit for like 10 weeks straight. That's all you do. You're just living. So it's really hard to create anything similar to that if you're suddenly, you know, if you're suddenly a parent and have other things you need to do. It's really tough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was your relationship? What is your relationship with Dill like? How did you guys meet, and how did that whole thing happen? Because I know you have you've done some projects specifically on him. Obviously y'all filmed like a bunch together. So,
yeah, I met Dill when I lived in San Francisco. One of my first apartments, Dill would stay. He stayed with me a couple times. This is when I was amateur, Dill was amateur. Dill must have been, I don't know, 14, 15. He'd come and stay. So I knew Dill back then. And then I didn't see Dill. Then when Dill kind of turned pro and got on 101, I never saw him. And I honestly don't think I reconnected with Dill or maybe even saw Dill until I moved to LA and was working for Transworld. So that was a real trippy thing for me, was like knowing Dill as sort of like a peer. You know, we were both like amateur skaters, and we both really like looked up to each other. And you know, at that time, it's like, especially then, it was like really sick when like LA skaters would come up to SF, you know, or like vice versa when we'd go down and skate LA. It was like really sick to do that, and you'd really create a bond with these people that were like, you know, you had that mutual respect, but you're from different scenes, you know. So Dill and I were we had a friendship like that, and then I didn't see him until he was like photosynthesis Dill. That was like the next time I saw him, you know. And I was a filmer, so it was like a funny thing. But yeah, so then when I moved to LA, I started just because I was with Van Engelen all the time, you know. I was working with pretty quickly, like once I started DC, which was 2002, 2001, late 2001. So I think Dill was always around. Dill like lived in LA, so I'd see Dill a lot. So that's when I started taking pictures of Dill and filming Dill. And then, you know, back then it was like there was a real kind of like a lot of the DC stuff was like a lot of workshop trips and stuff like that. So I spent a lot of time with Dill. Then obviously we made Minefield, and I've seen all the sort of like from 2000 on, I've seen all the sort of like the versions of Dill. I don't mean that in a bad way, but you know, he's like Dill, like very, you know, he went through some very specific periods of his life, you know, where he was doing very specific things, you know. So I was there through a lot of that.
How did the photo book come about?
That came around because I had so many photos of Dill. I was like, let's do something with all these pictures. Maybe we can do like a magazine article or something. And he was like, why would we do a magazine article? Like, let's do something else. I was like, then I looked back through it and I was like, damn, let's actually do a book. So then it's pretty simple. We just talked about right away. We were like, okay, it should be like a proper photo book. You know, it should be like it should be something nice that's in like Dashwood, you know, like that was sort of our reference. Like it shouldn't be a book we're going to make 1 million of them and ends up on Amazon. It should be like something really beautiful, and if it's gone, it's gone. So that's sort of just, and then I just kind of worked on it, and then I would periodically check in with him and make sure he was cool with what was in there. And he really only had a couple notes, a couple things he didn't like. Otherwise, he basically let me make what I wanted to make. And yeah, it was pretty fun.
Those semi-recent videos that you've been making of him, what are they called again? I saw the commercials on Instagram, and it's like you film them with a very specific camera. I believe it's all on film. You know what I'm saying? He jumps in the pool.
Oh yeah, that wasn't shot on film. That was actually, the whole thing was animated.
Okay, yeah.
That was like I basically filmed that on HD, but then I printed out these grids where like each frame, so it's like 24 frames a second, each frame was printed on this large piece of paper, and then I would manipulate each frame. I would like paint on it, spray paint it, put like foil on it, do collages, each frame, and then I would rescan that page of frames and then bring each frame in to eventually make this like minute-long thing. So I think it was like 1,300 frames or something like that. It took me 3 months. It was like the most I've probably ever worked on anything in terms of like how long it was, you know. And also I'm working on, I'm like, probably a lot of people aren't even going to see this, and if they do, they're not going to really understand exactly what this is. But like once you start on something like that, you have to finish it. So
the Japan video is really good too.
Yeah,
I really like that one.
Thank you.
Yeah,
that was the first thing I did when I came over to Adidas. And it happened really quickly. It was like, okay, well, we got this thing to do with Dill. This is like perfect. You know, he's in Japan right now. So we got to think of an idea of like what we're going to do in Japan. And like, you know, sometimes ideas just like appear, you know, like that idea literally. I remember I was laying in my bed upstairs and I was like, I just instantly could see the whole thing in front of me. Like, okay, yeah, Dill's staying in a hotel. It's a conversation between two people at a hotel trying to figure out who this guy is. Like I literally wrote the whole thing out on a piece of paper, and it was exactly what it ended up being. You know, it's like David Lynch would always talk about how ideas are like already exist, but if you're in the right, he would find a lot of his ideas through meditation. You know, like a lot of his films, like all those scenes, all those ideas are these things that came to him while he was meditating. But I do believe that sometimes ideas come to me fully formed. So anyway, that project was basically like, this is this is what we'll do. And we went out. I just went out there by myself. This kid Blake, who works with Dill, was out there. And you know Shinpei out in Japan?
Probably. I think so.
Shinpei lives in New York. Japanese kid.
Dude, I do know him.
Yeah, Shinpei
that's
is my
so
buddy.
crazy. Yeah.
He was out there too. So Shinpei helped. Yeah. And we had like.
I don't know him like that, but he was a translator for something. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I was talking to him just through Zoom and stuff. Yeah.
Shinpei's the man. So yeah, I went out there solo. This kid Blake was randomly there, who helps deal with all kinds of FA stuff. And then Shinpei helped us, and we just shot that in like 2 days. Like literally, like there's security camera footage in there, and it's just me holding a GoPro over my head. We went to the Cerulean Towers? That's what it's called, I believe. The big hotel in Japan. Total filmed there. We did get a room there one night, but we filmed there with like no permission. We just totally like renegated it. And yeah, some ideas just are like, if an idea is like simple enough, and pure enough, I feel like it can be really easy. Like not all film projects have to be that. I really do believe that. It rarely works that way, but sometimes when you have like a really good, pure, simple concept, it can actually be really easy.
So what did Adidas tell you? They were just like, go there and film whatever the hell you want?
Well, I had to pitch it, so I didn't have to write a treatment or anything. Now things are a little bit more, sometimes we have to put together full treatments. I think it's because I just started. I basically just like wrote down what I wanted to do and what it would be like. And they were like, okay, go do it. So, it was just like, but in reality, it was like, Dill's got a shoe coming out. We need to do something. He's in Japan, figure out a way to do it. This is how much money we have. So
it was cool. The lady asking, I think it's the owner of the hotel kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, he wakes up at weird times. He goes to bed at weird times. I don't really know what the hell he's doing here. And then the security cam footage of him like being nice to the front door guy, I think it was.
Yeah. The front door guy in that is Yasanori Hoke, who owns Super Labo, who made the Dill book.
Oh, no way.
So, and that was I was out there and I was like, Yasanori, do you have a suit? Do you think you could come and like act like the door guy? So that's who is in there, which is pretty awesome because not a lot of people, but if you know Tokyo and you know Super Labo, you definitely know Yasanori. So I had a few people who I would see comments on there, would be like Yasanori, but he was like perfect for it.
Yeah. No, he was. I thought he was definitely the front door dude.
Yeah. I had fun with it. I can't remember if it's in there. I think it is. It's like because, I know Dill so well, and it's like anyone who does just knows he's so fucking specifically eccentric in his own ways, especially in a hotel. So it's really easy to write that, And I think the conversation, right, the guy was like, he's like, I think he thought he might be like a software guy, like some.
He works in technology or something like that. Like I think he's rich off technology or something like that. Oh, that was a good one.
Yeah.
That was good. Yeah, that
was fun, man. Thank you. That had a, sometimes you'll work on something and it kind of just comes together, and like I still have people that bring that little piece up to me, it's
cool too because like he doesn't say anything, he's just kind of like, and it's being narrated naturally, organically through this conversation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was really easy and fun to put together.
Yeah. So now you're doing stuff for Adidas. You don't do stuff for Vans at all anymore, right?
Mm-mm.
So you left Vans after Propeller?
I left Vans after Propeller, and I didn't do any skate for like a year and a half. I was burnout, and I left on totally good terms. We just finished that big video. What else was I going to do? So I went and just did only kind of commercial directing for like a year and a half, like just fully freelance, which was awesome, but also a fucking nightmare because like freelance work is harsh sometimes. And I had kids, and the advertising world is crazy. I didn't really know how to navigate through it that well. So I was like, I kind of just jumped into the fire, and eventually I realized like I really miss skateboarding. It's funny, like when I was first started making skate films, I had this thing where I was always like, I just don't want to ever have to do this only to make money.